Good evening. I hope everybody's doing well. We are really grateful that you've all been part of this seminar series. If this is your first night taking it in, you are going to be able to catch up on the previous recordings and take it all in. But it's been a great few sessions, a couple sessions we've had, and we're going to end well tonight. Thank you to Tracy and James for making the trek in and helping make this possible. This whole thing of anxiety, God created us with the ability to fear for our own safety. It's part of how he made us humans, but then we also see soon after Adam and Eve are created that it became a part of the human condition, this sinful way that we live, as it can easily overtake our lives and be far different than what God had intended that realm of fear and anxiety to play a healthy part in our life. In this day and age, you're all sick of hearing about the current cultural situation, but we'd be amiss not to just point it out again that anxiety is rampant in our world. Culturally, the whole issues of racism and ethnicity adds all levels of tension, educational challenges and having to learn online, all the challenges with COVID around work, around church, around family. It just leads to this, I was going to say, low-level anxiety that's constantly gnawing at us. But I think in a lot of cases, it's a high-grade anxiety. And so we are just really grateful that, Tracy, that you put this together and are sharing it with us. We wanted to provide it as a ministry, as we focus on discipleship and what it means to follow after Jesus, that we would allow him to, through this material and through Holy Spirit, educate us and give us a greater understanding so that we can be healed, we can be better equipped, that we can be filled with the love of Christ to be his agents and hands and feet in the world around us. And so we are definitely wanting to thank Tracy and James. Tracy's investing in us with all that she's learned and taken in experience. And we trust that this has been us investing in you as well, Tracy, as a opportunity to share and put your material into practice as you keep going ahead in your vocational and ministry training. So we're grateful to be a part of that. Thank you to our volunteers that work with children and youth, but throughout the Rock Church as a whole. For those of you that are in other churches and serve, we are grateful for that part that you play there, and we trust that it'll be a blessing. If you are able to and are willing to help us cover the cost of this seminar, we would be more than grateful and invite you to do so. You can go to our website, www.trcyxe.ca. That's TRC for the Rock Church and YXE for the airport code.ca. And we would greatly appreciate you partnering with us and helping us with the cost of putting this on. My privilege and pleasure to pray with you and for you tonight. So would you bow your heads with me? Heavenly Father, I thank you for this day and thank you for your goodness to us. And for these times together, we give you thanks. We know that all truth is your truth, God. And so for everything from the foundation of relationship with you, our Heavenly Father, to even the science behind anxiety and what our bodies are doing and everything in between, we thank you that we can learn this. We pray that you would give us open hearts, minds, and souls and spirits to be able to receive what you have for us tonight. And I ask, Jesus, that you would anoint Tracy and give her what she needs as she shares. Would you take this time and make it yours for your purposes in each of our lives? Thank you that although we're gathered by the dozens tonight, that you can see us individually and give us what each one needs individually. So we thank you and praise you in Jesus' name.
All right, well, hello, week 3. Oh, wow. At the beginning, I thought, okay, we're at the beginning, and now we're at the end, and I feel like, I don't know if I'm ready for it to end. I feel like we could talk about this. It's something we could talk about forever and go in a million different directions, but there's so many places we could go. It is just a fascinating. We are fascinating. God created us human and fascinating the way he created us. just never-endingly in awe to me to discover new things about how we work and how he designed us to work and what the design was. So we are going to go. Again, I say the same thing. It'll be a lot to take in. Try not to take in the information. Try to let it sit with you. Try to let it come into you. Try to let it stir. If you can name those stirrings, we'll talk about more about what that is tonight. But if you can name the stirrings, I feel really alarmed, or I feel really frustrated, or I feel really uneasy, that's a really powerful thing to be able to do, or I feel really excited, or this feels really great. So in week 1, we began talking about love, right? We started connecting the dots of what does love look like? And what does love really have to do with anxiety, right? And how does emotion serve us? And what is this big emotion of anxiety? Because it is so big. It is so stirring. It comes at us. It can catch us off guard. It can blindside us. The beautiful thing that we know about anxiety actually is that it's really predictable. It shows up when there's something new. It shows up when we feel like we have to perform, and it shows up in the unknowns. And so when it comes up, I mean, it's right there for us, and it can be really predictable. So back to week 1, we talked about this thing called love, right? This big word of love, and recognized that love is the relationship. Love is relationship, and God invites us to enter into this everlasting relationship because he loved us first. He stepped into everlasting relationship with us. And then he invited us to love him as human beings with all of our emotions and all of our thoughts. And those two pieces put together actually move us to a place of maturity. And so we can take a look at emotion, and the job of emotion is meant to move us. It is a stirring inside of us. It's like this electrical charge, right? And it's meant to move us to caution when there's things that alarm us, right? It's meant to move us to, whoa, this is really alarming. It's meant to move us to seek togetherness, to seek that closeness and connection with the people that we come across and that we want to be with. Emotion stirs us to stop when we come up against things that we can't change, right? These futilities that we come up against, these things that we can't change, we can't do anything, there's nothing left to do. And so it stops us in our tracks to say, whoa, I can't change this. I just need to stop here. It's meant to move us to venture forth when we have that secure base, when home, that sense of home not being a building, but home being the safety of the relationship. When there's that sense of home in the relationship, then we automatically just have this desire to be curious, to go and venture forth, to kind of explore different things, to try new things. We become quite playful in what we long to do. It's meant to move us to shy away, and I can see on the slide here that blue shy away is not showing, which is maybe even appropriate for shyness. I didn't do that on purpose, but it fits, so that's a good thing. Yeah, emotion is meant to move us to shy away. And shyness has actually been given a really bad rap. You know, I mean, we try to get kids to not be so shy, to not hide behind our leg, you know, to not be clingy. Come on, just go say hi to them, go talk to these people. But actually, shyness is an attachment instinct. It's an instinct that says, you know what, you're not my people, so I don't feel comfortable talking to you. And it's something to be honored, actually. You know, I mean, if you are with a genuinely shy person and you don't know them and you sense that shyness, but then you'll see that shy person in a group with their people, there's no shyness there. You know, it's like this transformation happens, but they get into this village with their safe people and all the shyness falls away. So emotion is meant to move us to care. And we talked about in week 1 how important caring is and what caring moves us towards. It's meant to move us to resist, right? When we're feeling controlled, how many of us just want to push back? You know, you can't tell me what to do as we're all thinking these things inside. Emotion is meant to move us to resist when we're feeling controlled. And emotion is meant to move us to become our own person, right? To become who God created us to become fully ourselves. It's kind of this, Gordon Neufeld says it like this, separateness without the loss of togetherness, and togetherness without the loss of separateness. I can be fully myself and go into a group of people and be fully myself in that group of people. And I can be fully myself and go into a group of people, and that group of people makes space for me to be fully myself. And so we emerge. When this relationship home base is settled, then we emerge and we become exactly who God created us to be. And so I do not know. Hang on. There we go. So let me make sure I got all of this here. And now I'm stuck. Okay, Ron, I need you to tell me how to make my cursor move. I think we did this last week. Okay, the mouse is on. Oh, there it is. So let me make sure I got all the way through. Nope, it's all good. It's working. Okay, here we go. So we also talked about the defenses in the brain, and we know that every human brain is equipped to tune out the things that stress us out, to shut out the things that hurt, to repress bad memories. It's equipped to dull the pain, to numb out discomfort, to protect us against a sense of mortality. It's equipped to turn a blind eye to rejection. The brain is equipped to shield against a sense of insecurity, suppress alarming feelings, extinguish feelings of shame and embarrassment. It's equipped to divest of caring and responsibility, to deny shortcomings, and to filter out our vulnerable feelings, right? As well as these crazy stirrings that go on inside of us. And so we look at all of these things and we think, what's wrong? But actually, this is not a broken brain. This is a brain that works very well in the area of defense. It's doing its job to protect us against emotional vulnerability too much to bear. And so when we think about what the signs of this can look like in a brain, I have quite a few families that I work with. And oftentimes when kids start school, you see this often. They go to school and they start coming home and they start complaining of tummy aches and they start complaining of headaches. And all of a sudden they feel sick to their stomach and they don't want to eat their lunches. And there's all of these things going on in them. And they're talking about them. They're quite distressed about these things. But then the parent will say, well, I think they're doing fine because we've hit the new year now, and now they're not talking about this stuff anymore. They're not talking about the tummy aches. They're not talking about all of these things. So I think they've adapted. And so something that we really need to understand the difference of is what is adaptation and what is vulnerability too much to bear? What is stress? Because there is a difference. Because sometimes it's in what is missing that alerts us that there's a problem. And if kids are not talking about their feelings, right, we need to feel these vulnerable feelings. We need to feel. And if we're not feeling these vulnerable feelings, if we're not talking about the things that hurt, if we're not talking about the things that miss, that becomes a sign that something is going on. And so, is there a way through? Yes, there is the way through. It takes us back to these places of the relationship, right? Here we come back to the dance of not only relationship, but we come back to the dance of right relationship, which we looked at on the first week. The right relationship comes in caretaking, in caring and being cared for, right? And so right relationship is to facilitate this caretaking. It's to render those who are immature, who don't have their mixed feelings, who aren't able to pull apart the self-control and all of those pieces, it renders them dependent upon the ones who are responsible for them. And so it becomes our job to not necessarily have the answers, but we become the answer for the child. We become the answer to this place. And so we become the home of their heart. And the answer lies in becoming the home of their heart. I don't think there's ever a child that felt safe and secure in needing to tell their parent how to take care of them. That creates incredible insecurity and alarm within a child. And so it should feel really natural to a child to depend upon us, to lean upon us, to look to us, to provide and to take care of them. And this is the dance of right relationship that allows for growth and maturity. It's a place where children can be led to their feelings, these vulnerable feelings that we've been talking about, right? If they don't feel at home with us, then there's a big problem. Because we're the ones that make this space. We're the ones that hold this container. We're the ones that make room for these vulnerable feelings, for them to be able to have a soft heart and to give expression to these feelings. And we come up and bump up against a lot of things, right? That bring us up against what is most vulnerable. Because if closeness and contact is the thing that we long for the most and is the greatest desire, I mean, as we can see through the whole Bible, it's all about relationship. It's all about closeness and contact. It's all about longing to be close to. Then the greatest threat, like we talked about, becomes this place of separation. And this is where things can get really big. This is where the alarm can come in, because we bump up against these losses and these lacks, right? We can lose a pet. We can lose a loved one. We can lose the things that we're closest to. And this is what is the most vulnerable. This is what is the most challenging for us. This is the thing that we want to avoid, that we want to take off from. And we can see, because it feels really vague and it feels really daunting and it feels really jittery and really edgy sometimes. And so when we think about the face of separation through the lens of relationship, we can see that it's so much more than being with, right? It's about belonging. It's about significance. It's about mattering. And so when we look at it through that lens, then separation can look like not being invited, not being attended to, someone giving you, the look. You can have that look that says that something's not right, that tone of voice that says that something's come between the relationship, that we're not okay, the body language that we get that alerts us that something might not be okay in the relationship. Not being chosen for the team, somebody not standing up for a child on the playground. If we feel misunderstood, if we feel like we're too much, too intense, all of these things can be relationship wounds. What else do we come up against when we think about separation, right? If both parents are working and there's no one there to care for the child and the village hasn't been made, that's a separation that the child is facing. It's not that we don't do these things, it's that we'll talk about how we walk through these things, but that is a separation that the child faces. When the child leaves to go to school, they're facing separation. Bedtime is a huge one. For children, they call bedtime almost like the little death, because they're losing consciousness. They don't have the understanding. It's a huge separation. They don't have the understanding that the morning is coming. And so it can be incredibly alarming. It can be incredibly big. A new sibling comes along in the family, and for a child, massive separation, because now, I don't know if you guys have ever heard kids say this, but I've heard kids say, I just want mommy to put it back where it came from. I don't want my brother. I don't know if anybody else has heard that, but it's this separation that they're facing, because now they're sharing and mom's attention is going towards this baby, and they're not feeling the same sense of connection that they were. And so there's change. So they bump up against these things. And so this brings us back to these roots of relationship. These roots of relationship are what are meant to give us this place of contact and closeness. And so we also discovered that when we face separation, it triggers and stirs within us a lot of emotion. And so we know that if the greatest longing is connection, and the greatest threat is separation, when we face separation, we're talking about anxiety and alarm. But it triggers this place of alarm within us. It triggers this longing, right? This longing to get close to, this longing to try and bring close what doesn't feel close anymore. It stirs up all these kinds of frustration. It can come out in aggression. It can come out in words. It can come out in hits and kicks. It can come out in all kinds of things. And frustration can be aggression, but it can also be alarm. And oftentimes we don't see frustration as coming from a place of alarm. And so it can look really big. We'll talk more about this after, as we move along. I'm going to wait. Okay, so then the third emotion that we come up against when we face separation is this place of pursuit. And pursuit is meant to draw us close, like the rubber band, right? The rubber band, just like when I talked about when we lost our son at the Calgary Zoo, it's like when we saw each other, the rubber band was like, I got to get close. I got to get to my people. And the pursuit is meant to draw us close. We also talked about it can be an anticipated threat, or it can be a real threat, even if the threat of separation is a thought or it's something we think may happen. I mean, when we sit in COVID, we're sitting in the anticipated threat of what's coming next all the time. Because things change on a dime, and we're flipping and trying to catch up and trying to navigate these really big places. It's alarming because, we're constantly coming up against separation. Immediate households only. We can't see the people that we want to see. We can't do the things that we want to do. The freedoms that were there are not there. And so we are living in this place of separation that's triggering all of these things. And so even if it's not real and it's anticipated, the brain will respond as if it is real. Other things that can put us into the face of separation is separation-based discipline, which we will talk about, using timeouts, taking away what people care about, using consequences as a teaching tool. These are all forms of separation-based discipline, which has become the norm in our society today, and yet they can come at a cost, and we'll talk about what that can look like more. If peers become the answer, then that's a separation that is faced, because the separation then becomes with the adults, right? The separation to look to and depend upon the adults that are to be providing and caring for. If that gets lost, that's a separation that's faced as the peer orientation begins to rise. And so we know when too much separation is faced that we lose our vulnerable feelings, right? What does it look like to say, what are the signs that we have lost our vulnerable feelings? We're no longer talking about what's bothering us. We're not hearing things like, I miss, or I'm disappointed, or, you know what, I really wish it wouldn't have been like this. Oftentimes you'll start hearing things like, I don't care, whatever. So what? Not a big deal. It doesn't matter. I don't know. Those things can be signs that the vulnerable feelings are not there. And we can talk about the vulnerable feelings. It's one thing to talk about them, but we need to be able to feel them. It's in the feeling of the vulnerable feelings that becomes really important. And I think it's really important here to take a pause and to talk about the difference between emotion and feeling. And so emotion is like this electrical charge. It's like this, it's coming into our body, it's coming into the senses, it's stirring inside of us. It is this incredible charge. And this charge of emotion is to send feedback to the brain. And as it sends feedback to the brain then processes the feedback that's been sent to it and then sends feedback back down to the body. It's kind of like this relay system. So when the emotional charge comes in and it comes into the brain, what the brain's job is to do, the thinking brain, and what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to bring it into conscious awareness for us. It brings it into words. It brings words out that match the stirring that's going on inside. And so we know that we're getting signals all the time. Neuroscience is showing that the heart, like the literal heart, is actually sending signals to the brain. Our respiratory system sends signals to the brain. Our immune system sends signals to the brain. Our digestive system sends signals to the brain. And so all of these things are coming in, sending these signals to the brain. The brain is supposed to be providing these feedback. And it's this conscious awareness that comes. We become consciously aware with words. Putting words to things is one of the most powerful things in helping us to be able to move through, to name it, to match, and it has to match, right? We need to match the stirring with the words. That is a feeling. When we are feeling something, we are able to make it conscious. We are able to put words to it. We are able to give voice to what it is that is stirring inside of us. And so I'll tell a story. I don't know if some of you have heard this story. It's a personal story, but I was trying to wrap my head around this whole emotion and feeling because we kind of interchange them and use them as the same things all the time. And I had this experience, and it was a real life experience of exactly this. My husband took me to a movie theater a few years ago, and we were in the theater. It was a full house theater back in the days where you could sit beside people. And it got to this one scene in the movie, and all of a sudden, I started wailing, like not just tears rolling down my cheeks, but I'm going to move my microphone and show you. It was like, and I'm in the theater doing this, like repeatedly, and it was just coming out of me and coming out of my poor husband is like this, and everybody in the theater's turning around to see what's going on because there's this wild woman that's yelling and wailing, and he's like, I think this is really too much for you. I think we better go. And I'm like, you can't make me leave. And I couldn't leave, but I couldn't stay. And in my head, right, this is what's happening. I've got all of this coming out. My head is saying, what in the world is going on with you? Like, what is happening? What are you doing? Like, my brain had no grid for what was coming out of me. It was coming out, and my brain was like, looking at it, like with a blank slate. And so I made it through the rest of the movie, and we sat in silence quite a ways home. And so he finally says, so any thoughts on that? And I'm like, and I'm trying all the way home. Like my head is spinning because I'm always the girl who names everything. This is my way through. This is how I feel feelings. I get to the bottom of this. Let's name this. What is the problem? What is happening here? I could not name it. I said, I got nothing. Like, I got nothing. And so we went on, and I don't know, maybe a year later, we had a young girl living with us, and she decided she wanted to watch this movie. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, well, I'm at home. I'm in my safe place. Like, this isn't going to happen again. And so we get to the movie where it's on, watching the show, same scene. whoosh, there it goes again. And I'm like, I do not know what's going on. So I ran to my room and I shut the door and I threw my face into 5 pillows because I didn't want this girl to ask me what was happening because I didn't know. I didn't have a clue what was happening. But I gave myself permission to feel it. I put my head in a pillow and I let myself wail and wail and wail. And it was these guttural wails that all of a sudden turned into tears. And I was on the bed crying and crying, saying, God, I don't understand what's happening. I know that there's something that needs to move through me right now, so I'm going to give permission for it, whether I understand it or not. And so as I laid there and just had my tears about it, all of a sudden, I have 15 years old flashing through my brain and this incredibly traumatic incident that I had walked through, rolling through my brain, and it was too much. It was a time when my dog, who after 15 years was such a safe place for me through my childhood, and my parents decided it was time to put the dog down, but they decided to do it on a coffee break while I was at work. And so I got to find out and say goodbye to my dog in a truck in a parking lot, and then went back to work. And I had never thought about it since. And so 30 years later, right? 30 years later, because you know when you rub your feet on a carpet and you rub 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 and you can walk around for 5 hours and all of a sudden you walk up to someone and you go, and they go, you know? It's like this charge can sit inside of you unknown, unaware. Doesn't mean that it's not there. It's just that we haven't got a clue it's there. All of a sudden it hits this touch point and boom, it's out there. And so the expression was happening, but the feeling came when I was able to put words to this. This is incredibly painful. I feel like I've lost the biggest thing in my life. I don't know what I am grieving. This is grief. This is sorrow like I have never experienced. I don't even know how to put anything else to this but the words of the sorrow. This is so painful, God. I don't know what to do with this other than cry. It hurts. I don't like the way this feels right now. This is really hurtful to me, and I don't even know what I'm hurting about, but I'm hurting, and so I'm gonna let it be that. And so that's the difference between emotion and feeling. Hopefully that helps to connect that dot and help to make sense of that a little bit, because emotion is the charge. It's the emotional charge, and it's looking for the dot to connect, to bring it into a conscious awareness so that we can name it, so that we can put words to what it is that is stirring within us. And so, when we're facing separation and the defenses kick in, what happens to us is we have more emotion, less feeling. This is really annoying. Is it annoying for anybody else, my breathing? What do I need to do? This way? Like that? Does that work? Okay. And so what happens is we have more emotion and less feeling. There's more charge coming into the body. There's more stimulation coming in because we're taking in more and more stuff. But the brain is saying, I can't process all of this stuff. This is too much stuff for me. This hurts too much. It's too vulnerable for me. I can't take it in anymore. I heard some conversation earlier this evening about, I just can't even take in the news anymore. This is just too much. I got to shut it off. But yet I'm still feeling this charge because it's sitting in there. Right? And so when the defenses kick in, they stop the conscious awareness. They stop us from being able to put words in it in an attempt to try and protect us from what is too much. And so the problem with that is the body knows that it's there. And so we get this big jam up, right? Everything gets stuck. And so another one of Gordon Neufeld's phenomenal quotes, he needs to have a quote book. He says, whatever we ingest, we need to digest. And so in order to rest, in order to digest, we need to rest. And so we can see how the physical body is created to alarm. And this is where a lot of our digestive issues can come from. It's related to our emotional brain is connected to the immune system. It's connected to the digestive system. It's connected to all of these systems. And so when there's no rest in the system, then we see it giving us this feedback in our body. So for lack of a better analogy, really what we need is an emotional outhouse. That's really what we need, is an emotional outhouse, right? Like if we didn't have an outhouse to get rid of all this stuff literally, what would happen to us? And emotions are the same. So let's talk about when does the brain protect from when it's too much? When emotional expression has repercussion for the relationship. So, yep. Oh, good. Thanks. Okay, let's pause. Yes, Leah.
Thanks for taking my question. I just want to ask for everyone, and including myself, to get some clarity on, so when we are present with someone who is facing one of those electrical charges of emotion, or like some people call it a trigger, an emotional trigger, or an emotional allergy.
Yep.
Do we need to try and give them words to walk through that so that they can feel it in the moment? Or do we just do the be with to be safe for them?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And we're going to go there. We're just about there.
Okay,
so
then
can you hold that?
Yes.
And
definitely.
if it doesn't get answered for you a little bit later on, bring it back and ask me again, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that emotion automatically a trigger? Like, is that the same? Like, the trigger is the emotion,
Like you're asking, is the emotion the trigger?
yeah.
I think, is the emotion the trigger?
Like, say with your dog story, I get the dog story. Right? 30 years later.
Yeah.
So there was an emotion, which was probably deep loss.
Right.
Deep loss. I get that. So in another circumstance that also is a deep loss, like I'm interested in what the scene was in the movie.
The movie was Warhorse, and the scene was where the dad took the boy's horse and sold it for a warhorse, but didn't tell the boy.
So it's the loss.
So it was the same. Something happens outside externally that is a touch point for the charge that's inside that we don't know. So if there's no charge on the inside, if there was no charge on the inside, that scene wouldn't have had any touch point for me. It would have gone through like most of the rest of the movie did. But if there is an emotional charge and we hit a touch point, then that can allow it to move.
But it makes sense though, because it was just loss. I mean, not just, but you know what I mean? It wasn't death. Like if you'd have realized an animal was dying, that might have triggered a year earlier the loss of your dog at 15.
Yeah.
Because it was just this horse being sold, that's way different than the death of an animal, right?
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about the one step removed and how these things work. So this is really good. Hold it. We're coming. Everybody wants to get to this part. We are so close, and I think there's going to be so much discussion that comes. Yeah. Push pause. Just let me get through this piece. So when emotional expression has repercussions, so if our emotional expression is going to say that the relationship is not okay, we'll push that emotion down for the sake of trying to keep the relationship. If there is work to do that emotions can get in the way of, like coming to do this, I said to my husband, when you come up to do this, it's like everything in you just wants to not do it. You get nervous and you get jittery. And yet he says, but you sit down and you do fine. And yep, that's the defense is kicking in. The little switch flips and says, no, we're just going to set that aside for now so that you can do this. And then after it's all done and I get in the car, then all of that emotion starts flooding back. And the switch comes back and allows that feeling to come back. If there's a wounding environment that someone has to survive, then the brain will protect from that. If there's a lack of invitation for expression, I don't know how many people that I have worked with that have said to me, I grew up in a home where I was provided for, I had a nice home, my parents loved me, I had clothes, I had food, I had all of these things. There was no room for emotion. There was no room to talk about feelings. There was no room to feel feelings. We just didn't talk about them. We just pretended like they weren't there. And so then it gets pushed down and it gets set aside because there's no room. And so the brain will protect if there's no words for what someone is feeling. And so if we can't find words for it and it does become too much, that defenses, they continue to kick in because they're trying to protect from the charge and there's no feedback and it's just this jammed up mess that creates more defense. And the brain also protects when there's a lack of shielding that would provide from that sense of safety. And we're going to talk about that more too in what that looks like. We need to really pay attention to and ask the question when we're working with people, has this separation gone away? Because, I mean, ultimately, we want to see people feel. We want the vulnerable feelings to come back. And sometimes we need those defenses to survive. Sometimes people are living in a wounding environment, and that is what allows them to survive. And so we need to be careful in asking them to take them down. And I had an experience once. around that, and I didn't know any of this, and it was one of the hardest learning experiences I ever had. I had been working with a girl. She was coming in, all kinds of defenses, all kinds of big behavior, all kinds of frustration and alarm and pursuit energy coming out everywhere. And we worked together, and one day she just fell into softness. The conditions were safe. The brain ultimately decided, because we don't really decide when the defenses go down. The brain decides. The brain decided her defenses were going to fall, and she fell into this softness and this vulnerability that was absolutely beautiful. And it was as alarming for her, because she didn't see it coming, as it was surprising for me, because I didn't see it coming. And so we had this beautiful moment, and she left, and she went home. And I was absolutely thrilled. I thought, wow, like that was amazing. Until 45 minutes later, I get called into the office to the caregiver of this girl that is absolutely yelling and screaming at me because this girl didn't go home to a safe environment. So she dropped her defenses. She found her vulnerability. She went home vulnerable. There was no room for vulnerability. So what I did was I actually set her up for more wounding, because I didn't honor the defenses that she needed. I had no idea. I spun in that for months trying to sort that out in my brain. And so when we're working with people, now what I've discovered is they do need the safe place. Like Leah's saying, how do we walk through this? They do need the safe place. They do need to feel their vulnerable feelings. It is not our decision when they fall into their vulnerable feelings. It is the brain that decides. And so we can be that safe space. And what I do now is I work within both. We actually spend time and we create the force shield. We create the bubble. We create the armor. We create the defenses. They make their defenses up. You know, there's kids create them. They have these imaginary defenses that they put on. And so when they come in and things start to become vulnerable, and we talk about, yes, this feels vulnerable, and yes, this is a safe space. What's it like at home? Can you have these kinds of feelings at home? Is there room for this at home? Can we talk to mom and dad about this, or whoever the caregiver is, right? And if the answer is yes, then that's great. If the answer is no, then we say, okay, so how do you put the shield back on now when you go out? Because you need it. And so we need to make room, and we need to be aware of some of these things, right? In order for someone to come into their vulnerable feelings, because it is so vulnerable and it is so scary, especially if we've been so defended and it's the very thing that we've pushed away and ran from and we're trying to avoid. It is incredibly alarming to even give permission to touch on those things in and of themselves. And so we need to be aware of that as well, that when people touch vulnerability, it can often look more messy. It can look worse. Because in the unthaw of all of these things that have been tucked inside and tucked in different parts of us, it's incredibly alarming to begin to let them out. And so it can often look messier. It can often be more alarming. I had one person that I worked with, and they were almost in midlife. And for the first time, they had felt frustration. They had given themselves permission to outwardly express and name frustration and shame. And they were so alarmed and scared the first time they let themselves scream, they didn't know how to handle it. And so to even recognize, it doesn't mean it's actually a sign of emotional health, right? To feel our vulnerable feelings, to make room for our vulnerable feelings in a safe environment is emotional health. This is our emotional health and well-being. So we need to be able to depend upon someone to feel safe enough. And then we need to feel strong enough within ourselves to give permission for that vulnerability to unravel and unfold. And so, okay, we talked about this on week 1, right? Caring becomes the hinge pin. How do we become the caretakers of their hearts? We talked about this relationship with God, where he longs to walk with us in the depths, the deepest depths of knowing and being known. So this was just such the coolest thing ever, because if you see this picture of this hinge, it was about 25 minutes before the session started last week. I had sent my girlfriend the link. She said, I want to see week 1. And I said, sure. So I sent her the link that Dallas had sent to me, and she watched it. And about a half hour before we began last week, she sent me this picture. She said, Tracy, I was out for a walk, and this is what I found. And she said, I feel like God says he sees you. You know? And I don't think that was for me. I think that was for all of us. It was his invitation that we have taken the courage, because it takes a lot of courage to come and talk about anxiety. It takes a lot of courage to come and talk about emotion. And here he is saying, I see you. I see you. And he's holding this place. He's providing this space for us. And so I felt like it was just such a beautiful hug of affirmation in the midst of what we've been journeying through together. So I had to put it in. And so then we come back to this. How do we become the hinge pin? How do we become the caretakers of their hearts? How do we do this in their environment, like we talked about, and anxiety, right? In their alarm system, and in their attachments, in their relationships. I have so many stories that I could tell to kind of set this out. Maybe I'll tell a camp story. We were at camp, and we had just finished chapel, and we had gone back to our dorm, and there was a group of girls with me in this dorm, and one of the girls had come in and come behind the door to take off her shoes. Well, in the meantime, she goes to slam the door shut so that she can get her shoes off, as another girl comes walking in the door, and the door got slammed on the girl. Well, this triggered This evoked the defenses. This was too much for this girl. Something in her said way too much. So she burst the door open and she ended up hitting the girl behind the door, which is not funny. It was this big moment of, oh my gosh, okay, we are in it now. I don't know if anybody's ever been to camp, but when the defenses are triggered and things get big and they go from 1 to 1,000 before you can blink or breathe, you know you're in it, but you don't know what you're in, right? And then after she hit the other person, then you could see the look on her face. It was like, this is too much. I can't stay here. I need to take off. I need to get out of here. And for some people, that's a literal, I'm going to take off and walk back to Saskatoon kind of thing, right? And so that's what their defenses are saying. I'm out of here. I'm not coming to camp anymore. This is not working for me. I am going to walk back to the city. And so off they go. And so eventually Dallas and I are with this girl and he's walking down the ditch. And if I remember right, like he was wearing flip-flops and the toe on his flip-flop totally blew. So he's trying to walk in the ditch, trying to keep his foot in this flip-flop. And I'm driving their van along the side of the road and this girl is full of alarm, full of attacking foul frustration, full of all kinds of I hates and this is awful and I don't want this. And there was all kinds of foul frustration coming out. And Dallas just kind of walked alongside and kept walking alongside. And, you know, it might be nice to go back to camp and off and then continue on. And all of a sudden at one point, this girl just turned around and started walking back, but she was still frustrated, but at least she was going in the right direction, right? She was going in the right direction. And we're like, okay. So she gets back to camp and she goes back into the dorm and somebody brought her a plate of supper. We got her supper. I took it in, set it on the bed. I know you need some space. I know this has been really big for you. You know, I think I'll just leave supper here and I'm going to let you be. I'm not going to go far. I'm just going to sit outside the door. I'm going to come back in a few minutes and just check in, but just know that I'll give you some space if you need the space. And so that's what we did, is we gave the space. She had some supper, went through the evening really well. And the next day we were able to come alongside of this. And so I'll talk about that more. I'll come back to this story more as we move along. But what does it mean to be a caretaker? What is different in this situation, right? What happens is instead of providing what can we take away or what consequences can we provide or what punishment can we give or what lesson can we teach, we protected from the wounding of more separation. That's what we did. We protected against the wounding of facing more separation. And what happened was then the defenses weren't needed so much. And it allowed these defenses to just settle. We were providing this sense of relational support and safety, right? Where we were able to come alongside, where we were able to make room, where we were able to see this is something that's too much. I don't know what it is that's too much. It's obviously too much. We need to make it safe. We need to allow things to come down. And we need to allow the vulnerable feelings a chance to find their space. And so for her, we went through the night and she slept in the evening. And the next morning, we got up, she had some breakfast, we got things going. And then Dallas and I were able to sit down with her outside of the incident, right? Because inside of the incident, when defenses are up, there's no lesson to be learned. The logic brain, there's no reason, there's no ration, there's no logic, there is none of that going on. The only thing that's going on is full-on emotion. So the strategy becomes survive the moment and do no harm. Right? That becomes the strategy. Survive the moment and do no harm. You can always come back in outside the incident and deal with things in a place of calm. And so we were able to sit down with her. We were able to talk to her what happened. This is what happened. And she talked about what happened. And then Dallas talked to her about, okay, I know when things get too big, you need to run. I understand that you need to run. We also need to know that you're safe. So I need to come up with a place that you can run to so that I know that you're safe and that you're still able to run. He was honoring those defenses. And so she did. She came up with this plan. She came up with a plan, and then we were able to pray for her and ask her if she wanted to pray. And the vulnerability in how bad she felt about what had happened was there. She was able to give expression. The defenses were not needed. And there was a sense of safety there that allowed her to find her vulnerability. And beautifully enough, even later on in that morning, we were able to sit down with these two girls and have a vulnerable conversation. And when one realized, I hit because I was so hurt the door got slammed, and the other one was like, I didn't even know you were there. The look of vulnerability on both of their faces and the freely offered, I feel so bad, I wish that wouldn't have happened, fell out. No one asked for it. No one made it. No one forced that. It was in honoring the relationship. It was in creating the safety. It was in the womb of the relationship and honoring people where they are that allowed the safety to happen. Because any sign that someone is too big, any sign that someone is too much, any sign that there's no room or that I can't be myself is going to trigger that place of separation. And so this is how transformation happens. This is the way through. There's no shortcuts. There's no shortcuts. The only way out is through. It's not by looking what is at a surface level. It's by being able to see the separation that's been triggered underneath. And so some of the things that are really important when we're working alongside of these things is to focus on what does work. If you're in a situation and something has worked in the past, or you've seen them come through a situation in the past, focus on what does work. Focus on how to bridge the divide. Focus on the next point of connection. I remember one boy in the school and he hit someone, and the school policy is a 3-day suspension. Right? When you can't avoid the separation, when you can't avoid it, we need to be able to bridge it. And so it's Deb McNamara, I heard her say this weekend. She is an incredible author. I have some of her resources at the back to give you later. But she said this weekend. She said, we can be firm on behavior and gentle on the relationship. And so for this boy, the behavior was, you know what, the school policy is 3-day suspension for any hitting that happens in the school. We are going to have to honor that policy. It is the school policy. We cannot be hitting kids in school. This isn't working. So the policy is, and this is going to happen. When you come back, I'm really looking forward to a game of dodgeball. I know that's one of your favorite games. We're going to figure this out and we're going to find the way through. I know your feelings got away on you. I know things got too big. I know the frustration got away on you. I know this isn't what you would have liked to have done. So they made the relationship the bottom line. Even if it was an intentional hit, they gave them the benefit of positive regard. I know this is not who you would want to be. They bridged the divide. They were firm on the behavior held, but it wasn't about the punishment or the teaching a lesson. It was simply about, this is what we have to do, this is the policy, this is the situation, and I'm looking forward to. There was that bridge into the next point of connection. So it's not saying that we don't have things in place for things that aren't working. It's simply saying that we can be firm on behavior and make the relationship the bottom line. And so we want to make sure that we're leading in a way that doesn't push a child into more separation, that doesn't push a child into more defense. Man, there's just so many stories I could tell. When we think about right relationship, to care and to be cared for, it becomes our role, it becomes our job as the one providing care to be able to take the lead in this way, to be able to take the lead in a way that doesn't create more separation or more woundedness.
Back to Leah's question, what you're talking about right there is, like, you didn't deal with the emotion and everything at that moment. It was the next day.
For her, it was, yeah.
So that's kind of key to this.
Yeah, it can be key to that. And it depends on the situation, right? I mean, for this girl, the emotion was too big. The defenses were too big. To try and come in and come up with any kind of thought, rational process in the moment, she didn't have the mix, right? She didn't have the ability to have the self-control to regulate herself, to be able to bring that emotion down to the point where she could think her way through.
Even with this young boy, you have to wait 3 days.
Well, the suspension happened immediately, but it was a 3-day suspension.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
So it was dealt with in the moment. When he came back, it was reconnecting, building that relationship back in. Let me tell you another story. I had an 8-year-old in the school that I was working in, and he came in at 1 o'clock one day, and he was all over the map. His defenses were big. He was yelling. He was full of foul frustration. He came in to the school that morning that way. We have no idea what triggered it. We have no idea what evoked it. He couldn't sit in a classroom. There was an adult assigned to be with him all day because it was too much for him to be anywhere else. So he came into my room at 1 o'clock, which was his time, and he came in, I hate you, and I'm never coming into this room again, and you're just stupid, and I'm not gonna do this. And I'm like, yeah, something's not working for you. Today has not been a good day. I can hear that for you. And I'm not coming. And there was nothing that was going to keep him in that room. And I said, okay, I see that it's going to be too much for you today, but you need to know that if you don't come now, there's not going to be a time later today. I don't care. You're just dumb, and they're in this moment. And so they left with the adult that was with them. While 3 o'clock, they come back into my room. Hi, Miss A, I'm ready. I've come to play with you. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like, I have another student. And then that was it. Separation, and we were back in a million again. You're ugly. You're stupid. And I had all of these huge xylophones and metallophones with all these wooden bars that just really nicely lift off if you grab onto them. And so he's starting to grab onto them, and he goes like this. And luckily for me, because I was thinking, you're going to throw these things. Luckily for me, as he went like this, I was walking behind him. He wasn't holding them tight enough. He let me pull them out of his hand. And so he'd grab one and I'd pull it. He'd grab another one and I'd pull it. And he'd grab another one. And while he's doing this, it's like, you're ugly. And I'm like, yeah, I've heard that before. And you're just stupid. And I said, sometimes I think that too. And you're fired. And I said, school's going to be done in 20 minutes and I will be on my way. And I don't want to talk to you. And I said, yeah, sometimes I feel like that too. I just don't want to talk to anyone. And we were walking around the room like this, and it was just this constant going on. And in my head, I'm thinking, I haven't got a clue what to do. I don't know what's going on. What is happening here? And then eventually he stopped and he turned to me. And you know how some kids get they get the shivers before they cry? And you can see all this outward frustration all of a sudden goes down to the inside. And he started to cry. He found his tears, and all of a sudden he was, I hate it when I'm like this. I don't like it when I'm angry. I don't want to talk to people like this. I don't know why I do these things. And he had these tears. I have no idea what was too much in his day. But he was able to express the frustration. The frustration was able to move him to a place where he was able to feel the vulnerability and find his tears and feel his sadness. And he cried and cried. And then all of a sudden, you get the big arm wipe, and it's all wet down his arm. Miss A, I love you. Yeah, you're just so sweet. Can you walk me to the bus? Let's go, right? And And so that was it. It found its way through. And so in taking the lead was to provide that womb. We become the womb where they can be where we be the caretaker of their heart. We become the caretaker of their heart. The question is, what is it going to make it safe for them right now? And what's going to make it easy for them to depend?
Could I maybe interject or ask?
Yeah, please.
With regards to creating a safe place, being that hinge, that safe place, so that these things can swing out, whatever, or we'll look at that. Maybe you're gonna get to it, but I'm thinking right now that how important it is not only to be that in the moment, but afterwards.
Yes.
The continuation afterwards, the next day, the next week.
Yeah.
And how I'm thinking of my own self, how easy it is to be that in the moment, but to forget to be that later on when they're walking it out. Because that one moment isn't all healing hasn't just experienced.
Exactly.
I know you obviously agree with that. So I'm thinking to myself, man, this journey of learning to be the hinge and wanting to be the hinge is an ongoing. Can you address that somehow? How do we?
Yeah.
How is a caregiver, a person who is going to be that hinge? How do they not only be that person in the moment, but what can they do?
Right.
To remember to do that?
Yeah, and so I think what we're talking about is how do we continue on the process moving forward from the moment, right? The relationship is much more than that moment. The relationship is that moment, but then what does the relationship look like as it continues on, and how do we continue to walk into that? And the answer around that can become a lot of things. It can become, we talk about what it looks like. Just hold that. I'm going to keep going. We're going to get there. You guys are asking these really great questions that we're on the way to, okay? If there's any separation that we can reduce, see if you can reduce the separation. See if you can protect them from the wounding interactions that you know will be too much. So, for example, one boy out on the playground at recess, constantly hitting, constantly fighting, constantly was not able to handle this moment, constantly getting sent to the office. He could not handle being outside for recess. He did not have the capacity for that. So rather than continually sending him to the office, I decided to take the lead and compensate for what I knew was going to be too much. So what I did was I went to the teacher and said, hey, he's got music right after recess. Can I just have him through recess and he can help me set up the music room? It wasn't a punishment. It wasn't a discipline. It wasn't, you can't be out on the playground because you're not listening and you're not getting along. It was, hey, buddy, I really need some help. Because I knew it was too much. So they came in and they helped me started setting up. And then eventually I took one other safe person that I knew that they would feel safe with into the room at recess as well, so that we could begin building a safe connection with a small group. Because we know that they defend against rejection, and because defenses were so big for this kid, they were so defended in the classroom that anytime they were in the classroom, they were hitting kids, poking at kids, constantly bugging kids, constantly walking into places where they were going to get more rejection and more wounded. And so they were constantly in this place of separation, which just evoked more separation, which just evoked more behavior. And there was no win at the end of the day. And so we began to compensate and pull back into small ways where someone was there taking the lead to protect that. So to be able to read what can and cannot be handled, and to be able to set it up in a way that we set them up so the defenses don't need to be so much, and so that we can know that they can find a place of safety for those defenses to drop. And so, okay, here we go. So how do we become the hinge pin in the relationship? This is lots of the questions that we've been talking to and coming back to. And how do we do this? We do this by increasing the connection, right? In the moment, we can become that safe place. We can become that hinge pin when things are massive and big and 0 to 10. In the moment, like Leo was saying, do we simply be with? Do we put words to these things? I think it's always good to remember separation comes with 3 emotions: frustration, alarm, and pursuit. Frustration says something's not working for you. Things are not going well for you today. This is not the way that you wanted things to be. That's what frustration says. And to be able to say that to a child in that moment, I think is really powerful. It validates their stirring. Something's not working here. I can see that things are too big for you. This is really not going the way you wanted it to. I would be very frustrated too if someone hit me, or I'd be really frustrated too if I wanted the pink pipe cleaner and I could only have the blue one, because sometimes that's all it takes, right? And so to come alongside and give words to what's happening without having to correct or teach a lesson, yeah, this is really alarming. This is incredibly alarming. I would feel really alarmed too if this happened. Because alarm says it doesn't feel safe. That's what alarm says. I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe to be myself. I don't feel safe to do what I'm supposed to do. I don't feel like it's going to be okay. I don't feel like the relationship's going to be okay if I do this. That's what alarm says. And so to be able to put that language to it, yeah, something just doesn't feel safe right now, does it? This doesn't feel safe. This is really alarming. I feel alarmed too. And so when we talk about those emotions, one of the questions last week was, when you say frustration, you're actually meaning anger. Yes and no. Anger says it's your fault. Guilt says it's my fault. Shame says I'm just a horrible person. So those are all outward expressions of trying to put that emotion onto something, someone, or put it onto myself. Frustration simply is underneath that. Frustration is simply the internal emotion that says, this is not working. And once we can come to the point of our frustration and name what it is that's not working. I don't like you, just like this 8-year-old. I don't like you, you're stupid, you're ugly, I hate you, you wrecked my whole day, right? Anger, blame. But all of a sudden, yeah, this is really frustrating. Yeah, this is not working for you. Yeah, this is not the way you wanted it to be. Yeah, this is not the way I wanted it to be. I don't like it when I'm like this. We moved from anger to frustration. Once we were able to acknowledge and name the frustration, it then allowed it to drain into the sadness.
So frustration is really the brain trying to understand, make sense of what's all going on.
I'll repeat that. So the frustration is really the brain trying to understand and make sense of what's going on. It's trying to put words to it. Yeah. If we can put words to if we can put words to match the stirring, that's really disappointing. That's very upsetting. That's very hurtful. Yes, it feels very alone. It feels very lonely. When we can, and sometimes we need to be careful with that, because if they're not in a place where they're ready to receive that, you could get a punch in the face. You know, like if they're not ready for the vulnerability, it'll backfire and it'll just evoke the defenses more. So we really need to be careful and read those things. I find going back to the 3 primary emotions is the simplest. This is not working for you. This is very alarming. This feels unsafe. This isn't how it should be. Those kinds of words seem a little bit more easily heard and accepted. And so how to hold on to the relationship, like the question that you were asking before, how does this carry on? What the relationship becomes, and as the roots become deeper, right, those attachment roots of significance and mattering and belonging, and all of those roots come into place, what happens then is we can help them to hold on while apart by giving them that sense of significance. You know what? I'm going to miss you so much. I've got a great big rub on my back, and every time you go, you can just feel that rub on my back. It's with you, you know, or sometimes we have things that we can give them. We can send them to hold on to, whether that's, it can be anything, but not as a punishment, or it just needs to be a really special gift of connection. you know what? I'm going to be thinking about you while you're gone. I'd like you to take this with me, take this with you, and just hold on to it. And every time you see it, you'll know that I'm with you and that I'm thinking about you. Right? Bridge to the next point of connection. You know what? I know I am so excited. I'm going to see you or I'm going to talk to you tomorrow. I can hardly wait. Instead of putting them into the face of separation, we're putting them into the next point of connection. And then we need to collect them, right? Collecting is the oldest relationship ritual on the planet. Because when we go up to someone we haven't seen for a while, we don't walk up to them like this and say, you know what, I need you to do this and this and this and this. We come up to someone and we say, hey, how's it going? It's so good to see you. How are you? I've missed you. Right? We look them in the eye. We greet them with warmth. We greet them with an invitation. We give somebody this invitation to exist within our presence. Because we all know when we walk into circles and that invitation isn't there to exist. I don't know. I've felt that at times. People won't look at you. They don't want to talk at you. They don't acknowledge that you're there. The invitation isn't there. And so we need to collect them. It becomes the beginning and it becomes the way through. If you're working with a child and you don't have their eyes, their smiles, and their nods, if you're not engaging the relationship, that's the work to do. That's the work. We need to have their hearts. If we don't have their hearts, we have no place and invitation in their life for anything else.
And having their heart isn't them giving that to us, them receiving it from us or seeing it from us.
So them having our heart isn't them giving it to us, it's them receiving it from us.
Yeah, and so the child in the moment isn't going to be like, hey, I love seeing you. They might be you might be expressing that to them and they're receiving that.
Right.
So you're not expecting them to give that to you. Right. You're just giving it to them.
You become the lead. You take the lead in becoming this safe place. And if the defenses are evoked, you're not going to have their heart. Their attachment instincts are not going to be engaged. They're going to be pushing away with you from everything within them because it's not going to feel right to engage with someone when the defenses are big. And so then that becomes the work. How do we collect them? How do we allow things to come down to the point where things can soften? Where we can have those conversations. I remember one time downstairs at Bibleville, one boy walked in and everything was big and everything was all over the place. And somebody that was new that came in that didn't know him came up and started, you need to sit down at the table. I need you to come over here. And it was very nicely done. It was, just taking the lead and trying to give direction. But that child didn't have a connection with that person. There was no attachment. There was no relationship there. And so that kid, I'm not listening to you because I'm not connected to you. And then they got upset and then that just pushed their face into more separation. And so eventually I just sat down on the floor with a whole bunch of plasticine and started playing with plasticine. Kind of went over by where they were and started playing with plasticine and like, oh, I got this really cool blue plasticine and I'm not looking at them really. I'm not trying to go at this directly. You're just trying to be just kind of nonchalantly playing with plasticine. Right? And pretty soon they're like sitting beside you and they're playing with plasticine. And at the end of the day, I got this beautiful rainbow plasticine heart. It was a pink heart and a blue heart and a green heart, and they were all stuck together with plasticine. They handed me this heart. Right? Collecting. It becomes the work. And until we can collect someone, there's nothing else to do but collect them.
How long can it take to build that relationship? Like, I have to, well,
I don't know if this is on. Oh, there. Do you still have lots of stuff to go through? Or should we save questions till the end? Yeah, no, that's...
Well. Okay, ask the question.
So, I have 2 children that have come through the foster system in my home now. They've been there since April 4th.
this year? New.
So I feel as though, like, some of the stuff is really important for what happened in my house just today. But how long in these larger, like, you know, group
Exactly.
events on a Wednesday night, once a week, like, how long can it take to build that relationship so you
Yeah.
can collect them?
And that, well, collecting becomes the work. And it's different with every child because ultimately the brain decides. We don't have a say in that. We can't force it. We can't command it. We can't demand it. We can't coerce it. The more we do any of that, the longer it's going to take. So all we can do is continue to create the safety, make it easy to depend, give them ways, right? Listening to them with their full attention. Speaking back to them, yeah, I can see this is really new for you. This is new for all of us. We're going to find our way through. Those kinds of things, right? Just reflecting what you're seeing is stirring in them, remembering what is important to them. These are all ways to collect, caring for them in unexpected ways, like sliding cookies under the door or just sliding little notes in their lunch boxes or just anything that shows that the invitation to exist is there. The delight in your voice and your eyes is huge. It's a collecting in and of itself. Giving kids check-ins. You know what? You're in your room right now. That's great. I'm just going to come back in 5 minutes. And when you come back in 5 minutes, you're not coming in with an agenda for anything other than to collect them. What are you working on? What are you up to? Wow, that's super cool. Oh, I'm so glad I got to see that. Come back and check in them in 5 minutes. Collect them some more.
I have to do that with the father.
Yeah. And we have to do that with everybody. I mean, life is about collecting. You know, playing together, having the warmth in your voice, being able to sit down and be playful, using their names. These are all things that allow us to come into connection and to build this and increase this connection that we have. If they feel any kind of shunning, if they feel any kind of pushing away, if they see the lack of invitation in our eyes or in our body language or in our tone of voice, right? And if you can't collect with the eyes, collect with the ears. And I think I told that story once where I had a boy and he was head down in a ball, hood over his face. There was no way he was going to look at me. There was no way we were going to get anywhere in any kind of a situation. So all simply I said was, I know you can't look at me with your eyes right now. If you could look at me with your ears, would you like to come to my room? And he stood up and immediately walked to my room. And collecting after that looked like the defenses were too big for any kind of conversation. There was no talking. He could not talk. He could not look at me. He just curled up in a ball. And so I just said, I'll be at my desk. I'm not going to stay in the room with you. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be right here. And then I said, I'm going to check in on you every few minutes. Just take as much time as you need. And in 10 minutes, I took him a bottle of water. And in another 10 minutes, I took him a granola bar. And in another 10 minutes, there was just this process. And when he finally did begin to open his mouth, it was in a stutter. His defenses were so high and he was so alarmed that he couldn't even get words out. It was just, it was just a stutter. Yeah, this has been very alarming. This has been too much for you. I totally get that. And I'm saying that from across the room because even being in his space was too much at that point. So really, when we take the lead, it's really about reading. You're reading the situation, you're reading the child, you're reading about what is it that is going to make it easy for this child to depend on me and easy for me to be able to take care. What is it that's going to make it safe emotionally, right? The caretaker of the heart. How do we make this emotionally safe in this moment? And so that brings us to this place, right? We become the shield. This is the shield. You know, we can't protect kids from the wounding that they will experience on the playground, in the school grounds, with their friends. We can't protect kids from all those things. What does protect the heart is the safe container that we create. We become the safety. We become the shield because what we say and think matters more than any of all of that. And so becoming the shield makes room for them to be able to express the frustration or express the alarm or express the emotion, which will lead them eventually to their vulnerability, to be able to find their tears, to feel the sadness and disappointments about the things that have not been working. If that makes sense. And so we're back to the only way out is through. We need to feel our vulnerable feelings. They move us to our caring. They move us to our tempering. To temper, right? To the self-control. When the frustration is big, the caring moves us. It tempers. Temper not meaning angry, but to temper means to call forth the balance of. And so if we can be the ones to hold their hands, if we can be the ones to invite and make room for this emotional expression in this place where in this slide, right, this letdown, this permission to feel these vulnerable feelings, then what comes out on the other side of that, like for all of us who have had a really amazing cry, we've got to the point where we're striving and we're trying to change it and trying to change it and trying to change it and trying to fix it and trying to make it better. And all of a sudden one day we throw up our hands and say, I can't make it better. I can't. There's nothing left to do but cry. And sometimes that is the truth. Sometimes there is nothing left to do but cry. And so we fall into this really big, ugly cry. Right? Beautiful cry. That's right. Beautiful cry. And on the other side of that is a place of rest. The situation hasn't changed, but we have now become changed by what we cannot change. That is adaptation. That is resilience. That is inner transformation. That is healing. That's where it all is. That's where it all sits. Right? And so the help that is not helpful in all of this, I had someone come to me once and said, I just spent an hour sitting with someone in all of my anxiety, and all they said to me was, you need to stop thinking negatively. You need to start thinking positively. You need to just be happy. Well, don't they think that if I knew how to do that, I would? Like, seriously? Right? And so we're having this conversation. So to tell people to not experience the frustration, to not experience the sadness, to not experience the disappointment, that's not helpful. It only creates a greater emotional charge and greater separation and defense. You should know better. You should know better. And we all know that we should know better, and we all know that everyone should know better. But when we go back to this idea of the emotion and the brain, we know now that when the emotion and defenses get so big that all the should know betters are gone. That's what we lose. We lose the ability to know better. And then after the emotion calms down and the brain comes back, then we feel guilty because we should have known better. When really the brain was just doing its job. So telling someone, don't cry, calm down, just calm down. Has anyone ever said that to you when you're in the midst of this emotional, it's not that big of a deal? Yeah, that doesn't work for me. You can see it's an emotional charge for me already because it's coming out in the tone of my voice. Those things just don't work for me. I need someone to say, oh yeah, okay, things are pretty big for you right now. Yep, that's all I need, right? And so fighting our way back out of something never brings us through. It only keeps us stuck. So the vulnerability comes in the permission to be vulnerable. We can't force it to happen. We can't make it happen. We can't go looking for it to happen. All we can do is when the vulnerability shows itself to be there, we can make room for it. And if you're at work or you're in a situation where it's everything, like you're with kids and these kids are big and all of your stuff gets big too, then as the adult, that's where we have to put it all away. We have to push pause on our own stuff. Okay, we just need to push pause right now, and we need to come back and revisit that later. And so then we actually have to make time to revisit that later because it's important. Those things are important. It's caring for others and ourselves, right? Consideration of others and ourselves. And so, our job is to walk alongside, to make room, feel our feelings, realize that the relationship is the way through. It's what hurts us. It's what gives us the wounds. It's a double-edged sword, right? It's a double-edged coin because the very thing that is made to be safe can also be the very thing that wounds us because when we give our heart to someone else, we've now set ourselves up for loss and lack. We've now set ourselves up for separation because we could lose the very thing that we've given our heart to. So we live in this tension of this. So the face of stress underneath stress is really separation. Trauma is an incredibly distressing situation. So, one more. I want to talk about play because play is kind of been a forgotten and lost art that is a phenomenal way through. It bypasses the defenses. It goes right past them. And you can often get at things one step removed, completely indirect. Movies, music, drama, games, right? Art. All of these things can become one step removed. I remember this girl that lived with us, and she had no words for her feelings. Frustration erupting all over the place, demanding, prescriptive, bossy, needing to be in charge. The alarm was huge. The pursuit to try and get back what she had lost was incredible. The frustration that came out was never ending. And so what we found was movies were just beautiful. I don't know how many times we watched the movie Freedom Writers. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. Freedom Writers, based on a true story. We watched it over and over again. It's about a whole peer group of people who didn't have safe connections and who were constantly fighting against each other in the gang riots in LA, and about one teacher who created home, who created the safety, who allowed these kids to find a safe place of home, not only for themselves, but as a group. And so she watched this over and over and over. Another one that we watched over and over was Soul Surfer. It played with her alarm. I don't know if any of you have seen Soul Surfer. True story, a girl gets her arm bit off by a shark. Like, she watched this hundreds of times and talking about, I want to go to Hawaii and I want to get my arm bit off by a shark. I think that would be just so cool. This would be the greatest thing ever. Yeah, wouldn't that be cool to get your arm bit off by a shark? And we would just play with it because it's touching the alarm indirectly, right? Kids, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, hide and seek, monsters, capture the flag, all of those games, we're playing with alarm in a safe way. We're allowing them to touch it without just taking off a gaping wound and sticking our fingers in a whole bunch of infection. Play is phenomenal. It can be in music, right? You'll hear kids listen to songs. This girl that lived with us, there was this one song by Eminem that she listened to over and over and over again. And he talked about his relationship with his mom and the hurt and the anger and the things that happened. It's an incredibly sad song. And yet for her, it touched on the separation. She was able to touch the separation without going at it directly. Journaling, getting things out in words, allowing them places to bring words to things, to find expression. And books, stories, movies, that's a great thing because you can talk about a whole situation without talking about them. It can be about the show. All of a sudden, it's about the character. It's about what's happening in the TV show. It's about what's happening in the movie. And they're talking about loss. They're talking about grief. They're talking about all the separation that they're facing, but it's not them, it's the movie. And it allows it. And sometimes we all get blindsided because have you ever watched a movie thinking you're actually just going to check out and you find yourself in a puddle of tears? Because it moves us. Bypasses all those defenses and it moves us. So to bring play, not play for the sake of winning, not play as in I'm going to win a trophy or I'm going to get a medal or I'm going to be the best, not play for outcome. That's not the play. The play that we're talking about is play for the sake of expression. Fake for real, I had an 8-year-old call it. It's not for real. It's not for real. So because it's not for real, we can touch on these things. Giving them an instrument. Some kids love an instrument. They love to play. If that's where it is for them, find the way through. Can be anything, right? We can help to reduce these levels by allowing them to find expression in ways that are one step removed, because indirect is the best way until they fall into it.
Well, that would help build reflecting. We call it play therapy.
It can be therapy. It can be, the question was, do you call that play therapy? I don't know that I would be assessing at that point. It's simply making expression and making room for emotion to come out. So can it be therapy? Yes. Is it play? Yes. Would it fall under the definition of the medical model or the education of play therapy? I don't know that the assessment would be the same. We're not doing this for the sake of assessment. We're doing this for the sake of.
This is also, I think, a place, I'm just thinking out loud, I hope that's okay, where pets, where animals can actually come into the play.
Where animals.
Be that distraction.
Yes.
You know, whether it's a cat, a dog, bird, fish, or in the case of one young lady I know, a ugly, what do they call those little lizards that are like a dragon, a golden dragon or something? Anyways, but now I'm understanding that is a place that she can focus or allow safely her to touch that, those vulnerable spots through that
Yep.
thing, you know?
Animals are beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah, animals for the sake of play, like equine horse therapy.
yes.
Bringing kids into horses. Play with, I know some kids who can talk about things. Oh, well, my dog feels really angry right now because this is what happened to his family and this is what happened, and so it becomes the one step removed. It becomes the safe place as an expressive outlet. Yeah, animals is a powerful.
Well, I think one thing that I'm just thinking out loud again is like things like even cooking and like you show camera photography, because we have older children and younger children, right? So, but then, I guess it's always got to be at that genuine level. If you're just saying, hey, we're going to be cooking now and you're going to get to, and they don't like cooking, then, so you really need to be, as you had said, be in tune, understand as that hinge person, what's going on, what's going to be received and not received. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think authenticity, it has to be genuine. If kids sense any kind of an agenda that you're just doing something to get them to do something, they are 10 miles back. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Are we going to group time at all?
Well, that's a really good question.
No, we're not.
Okay, thank you. That was what I was waiting for. Good, this is all
I
good.
think we should ask some questions and you can put it into some practical terms for us.
Okay.
There was a few questions through Zoom. There was probably some clarification.
Yep. Ask away. We'll just stop there.
So I recently just finished my early childhood, and your play your play expression stuff
Yeah.
reminded me of a statement that was in my textbook about play over the this stuff is like play for the process over the product. Would you like expand on that a little bit? Because this stuff kind of just is like for expression, which is for product, not a process, for a process over the product for a child. Is that technically part of it?
Process over a product. I think in early childhood development, play talks about their process of learning fine motor skills, sensory things, their process of touch, all of that kind of things. And so they're not necessarily wanting outcomes of great pieces of art or great pieces of something like that. What they're wanting the kids to do in early childhood is to be able to experience play, experience the process of what it's like. I was doing consulting actually at a childcare center this morning, and some of the play for process was they gave them water play, and they each got water buckets full of limes, lemons, and oranges. And so the only process in that for them was touching the oranges, pulling them apart, doing whatever they wanted, pulling them out and putting them back in, putting them in somebody else's bucket and putting somebody else's back in theirs, just to allow them that process. So play for process in early education, I would say, is that. But play, what we're talking about for emotional expression, is the sake of allowing frustration to come out. Like one little kid that I have loves to throw. So play for the sake of expression then becomes we go and we throw rocks in a creek. We throw rocks in a stream. And when they start throwing, then all of their expression comes out in that throwing. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. I
Okay.
was just wondering because it was just spinning around in my brain now.
Good. Questions are good.
Tracy, while we've been talking about children quite a bit, do these principles apply to adult situations and marriages? And can we have a bit of a conversation about some of those things, that how an adult looks when they become defended?
I think the principles are very much the same. Separation is separation, whether you're 5, whether you're 18, whether you're 20. Another Gordon Neufeld quote is, we all get older, but we don't all grow up. Because maturity isn't in age. Maturity is in the ability to take up in a relationship with our emotions. And so some people can be in their 50s and be incredibly stuck, either because there was no room in the home for emotion as they were growing up. It can be because they've experienced trauma and stress so much that the process of safety hasn't been there for them to unfold. I think of myself as an adult. Really, I was 24 when I met God, and God blew the lid off of my defenses. I went to the bottom of the ocean before I even sat on the top, I felt like. And so the journey through that was very much the same. It was giving permission. It was making room. There was times where it would be writing in my journal for 4 hours, all the FUs and the swear words that were foul, that weren't typical of me, and yet the frustration was so big, that's how it came out. There were times where when I hit the rage and anger stage of starting to unravel some of the things in my life, fortunately, James's work gave him permission to stay close, because I would be able to call him and say, like, I'm freaking out, I need to get out of here. And he could come home and be with the kids, so that I could like dig flower beds, or, like I would dig flower beds from grass in 20 minutes. It was like the frustration and the anger needed a way out in a way that wasn't going to hurt me and someone else. Or I'd run until I'd fall on my face and couldn't run anymore. Or there'd be times where I'd go to the park and I'd get on a swing and I would just swing and swing and swing. And there'd be kids there. Can I have a turn? No. Swing and swing and swing. Like I was so in my own defenses and emotion that was the way through. And so I don't think it's so much about age. I think it's about safety. And the defenses will not settle until there is a safe enough place. I've had some people in my office, 60 years old. How come this is happening now? What's changed in your life? Tell me about your life. What's changed? All of a sudden, they're in a pocket of space where circumstances in their life have changed, and the environment around them has become safe enough that the defenses are catching them, dropping and catching them by surprise. And so, yeah, I think in marriage, it was really important, like for James and I to walk through this. It was not an easy dance. Not easy for him, not easy for me, not easy for us, not easy as a family. It was not easy. And yet it was in naming it, giving permission for it. I remember, and I don't know, as a church, I'm going to be a little bit vulnerable and tell this story, because maybe if it was something for me, it might be something for someone else. I was experiencing all of these vulnerable emotions, and they were all coming up, and I didn't know what was going on, and I didn't have the way through. And I remember going to churches, and a couple of them, and asking for prayer. And the prayer that I got was casting demons out of you. You know, you can get off of her now in the name of Jesus, and you need to get out now in the name of Jesus, and those kinds of prayers. And they actually made it worse for me, because I was so confused. I don't feel like that. I feel like I got all this stuff going on inside, and I don't know what's going on. Like I didn't know what to do. And I remember coming home one day and opening my Bible and reading in the Gospels where it says Jesus was baptized by John, and then, you know, the dove ascended, and here's my son who I am well pleased. And then the next verse, and then he was immediately led into the wilderness by the Holy Spirit. And I read that, and I stopped, and I read it again. He was led by the Holy Spirit into the wilderness. I'm like, you took him there? Like, you actually took him to that spot? Like, I didn't know how to make sense of that. And I don't know what it looks like for other people. In that moment, what I felt like happened for me was an invitation to say, I'm leading you into your wilderness. Will you follow? Will you follow? Will you believe that I can be safe for you there? Will you believe that if I could sit 40 days in that wilderness, that I can hold you in yours? And so the invitation was given. It was not a forced invitation. It was not a coercive invitation. And when I came back with, you know what, that's too much for me. I can't go there right now, because sometimes we can't. Then I felt the safety to say, okay, I'll sit with you until you can. And so I don't really believe that age is a factor.
And trauma can trigger in the 40s or 50s or 60s, in my experience.
So the question was, trauma can trigger in 40s or 50s or 60s. If the charge has been in there and it has not been processed, and the environment becomes safe in that period of time, then yes, that can bubble to the surface, and it's going to want to find room to move. Emotion moves. It's meant to move, right? The electrical charge has to move through. Emotion is the same. So if it has not moved and it's stuck in there, don't be surprised if you land in a safe spot if it bubbles to the surface. That's an invitation that God is giving us to make I call it the great exchange. Because he takes from us the things that keep us from being who we are, and he leaves us with himself and the acceptance of becoming who we really are. And who we really are, who I really am today, is the sum of every single experience, good, bad, ugly, that has ever happened to me. That is who I am today. And it's all beautiful. in the felt vulnerability of being able to allow permission for it to move through.
I know the great exchange. I was trying to write that.
It's on the recording. You'll be able to listen to it again. I probably couldn't.
Is there a recording of it?
I couldn't restate that.
But that was really good.
Thank
It
you.
was really good.
I'll have to watch it. I'll have to watch it too. Learn something for myself.
Do you have a list?
Hang on over here. I have to write it in my book. It'd be fun to write a book one day. Do I have a list of resource?
Like you just went really, really fast, and I think you were reading it off of a page, but you had Catch the Flag, like all those really good ideas.
Oh, no, I don't have that on a list, but I bet you Brianna would have a list, or Sarah would have a list, or Brooklyn would have a list, like
You had Dodgeball, Catch the Flag.
monsters, lava, anything that's going to play with their alarm, anything that can play with their frustration a little bit in a safe way, like throwing rocks in a river. You know, I mean, the idea is just to find safe expression. For one girl I know, her mom kept phone books in the vehicle because her thing was when she got frustrated, she just wanted to rip. So she would just rip Kleenex boxes and rip phone books, and she just ripped them and okay, thanks, Mom. You know? And so it can be anything. I don't think there's a wrong answer. The important piece is that it's safe for you and, you know, it's not hurting them and it's not hurting anyone else.
But I just thought, what you said originally was play is a lost art.
It is. It's something that we've lost.
And I think if we can get them off their devices, even as a family, and go out in the yard and play dodgeball,
Yep.
maybe that's helpful.
That's connection, collecting. Yes, Amy.
Before I ask my question, Leah, did you have more questions from Zoom?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So kind of, oh, well, whatever. I don't need to preface it. I've talked to a lot of people that might say that they are just not feelers, right? They're more thinkers. Or maybe people would say that it just doesn't come naturally to them to identify or talk about their emotions or to feel that in that way. And so kind of within the context of a variety of different personality types and different expressions of the emotion and of the feeling, can you comment a little bit on like what you think is like the right place for that? Like when is it maybe just an excuse or an unhealthy way of coping, and when might it be that some people just don't feel things as deeply or express things as fully?
I think that would be a loaded question. You would really need to know the person. I think initially you would really need to know, that. Some people don't cry. You know, like they're not tears that are physically seen. And men often, I find, you know, they can feel the disappointment and they feel the sadness, but it might not be an outward expression of tears. And so when I say tears, I mean, yes, it can be physical tears, it can be that, but it can also just be this deep internal sense of guilt and sometimes if we've never really paid attention to it, there's not even an awareness that they're feeling that. I think I'm going to put my husband on the spot a little bit, but I think he's very much like that. It's like he feels really deeply, and yet to find words for that is not so simple, or to even sometimes recognize that that's what's happening is not always there. So there is lots of different personalities, there is lots of different ways, and it may be the defenses, right? It may be, but that would be discovered within the relationship and getting to know that person. Yeah, I don't know that answered a question, but yeah. Can you come up to the mic?
Thank you. With regards to expressing emotion and personality types and not being able to, I'm reminded, I believe it was our first session, and maybe it wasn't, maybe I'm just thinking this, I heard it, but that the emotional expression of like, to have a healthy emotional expression, that's what God created. He gave us emotions. He gave us joy and happiness. He gave us sadness. He gave us frustration and anger. And so to be emotionally healthy and to do that, express it well, is be able to express those emotions. And so in a society, and perhaps it's gone back for generations, that's put, even within the church, has stifled some of those things. Like, I'm thinking of my own self. Some of my emotional expressions are not healthy, but I want to learn how, and I may not attain that completely before I see Jesus. So, I'm going, I got maybe 25 years left, so, it's taken a long time. All that to say, I think, though, that the joy of working with children and with what is that they can be better off. I think we might have people in our life, I might even be that person, I might not fully attain some of that expression and that ability to be whole, and to the greatest extent that perhaps a young person who's been raised in that and been nurtured in that will be when they're 62. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I'm not trying to put a heavy on myself, but at the same time I'm recognizing that, yeah, I think of my own husband and people in my life that they don't express it, and they might never be able to learn how to do that, but that doesn't mean that that's normal, if I can put it that way, that it would be more right to raise children and to help children be able to fully express in their joy, tears, sadness, frustration. Is that right?
We're kind of going against the grain, aren't we? It's kind of like a salmon swimming upstream, because the norm is calm down, time outs. We use separation-based discipline. We take away what kids care about. That's what we use against them. We use the relationship against them, right? If you can't do this, then you can't be with me, or I'm going to take away your toy if you can't do this. And so society really has become focused a lot on this whole idea of calming it down. And you need to get control of yourself. You need to stop this behavior. And so when we do make room for it, we are swimming upstream. And yet it is the only way to maturation. It is the only way to maturation. Feeling our feelings, having relationship with our feelings, then allows us to have relationship with other people's feelings, which then makes room for us to all be ourselves. Which is the way to maturation. Come on up. One more question? Unless Leah and Dallas say something else.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to.
No, ask.
Take time.
Take the time.
Long ago, it's funny, I read a Gordon Neufeld book, and it was huge in my parenting. It just lit, and it was all about connecting, which to me, in my hearing, connecting is like collecting in a sense. With connecting, collecting can happen. I guess that's sort of the question, and I think it's kind of a question. So for me, I found, because it was my own children and then other children that you knew well, that understanding their love languages helped in that, because then I could, especially if it was something bigger and I felt I needed to connect and collect with them in a bigger way. So I kind of is a question that I'm always wondering, is that a piece of it? Is understanding their language, love languages, is that helpful? But then I also always thought on my own, there should be a sixth love language, play. Which maybe to me now just is like, well, maybe that's just above all play, because I just found that worked really well. And I just have found through different scenarios in our home when there's been trauma, like watching TV, then it leads to a rubbing of the back, and how that's just beautiful. And then when I substitute teach, it's good if I can collect and connect quickly. And I literally will just tell the class at the beginning of the day, I'll look at them and I'll go, I know you think this will sound strange, but I will like you all. Because I know I can go in the power of God in that, and I know that I will, and I feel very confident. And so, I don't know, to all
Making
of
it safe.
yeah, and literally you can just watch the bad kids' walls go down.
Yeah.
And it's so awesome.
It becomes in the presence. It's not even what you've done, it's who you are.
yeah, and God
Taking
in
the
us.
lead, taking
Right.
the lead,
thank you so
sitting
much,
in the
'cause this is
provision.
making so much sense to me now. But, so I'm sorry, I don't have a
That's
question.
beautiful.
I think I have an
No,
affirmation
thank
for you.
you.
Because it's starting to make sense. So.
Thank you for sharing. It's beautiful to hear. Because it is so intuitive, right? I mean, we're putting language to things that are so close to us. We're all going, oh yeah, this is it. But it's this intuitive place in us, and that's what it is. It comes from within. It's who you are. We become the answer by providing the relationship, just like God is for us.
I feel like you just put wheels on my cart.
Oh, good. You're going to fly now. Love putting wheels on carts.
We're gonna ask one more question off Zoom.
We're going to ask just one more.
Good.
So this is from Hannah, and she said, what about children who are not able to overcome the separation and it is very ongoing? Have you had any experience with how to work with kids in this?
Yeah, that's a really daunting, a really difficult, and a really big thing to walk in, because the separation isn't going away. So they're constantly living in this wounding world. They're constantly living in this wounding environment. And you know, we don't know what happens on the inside. We really don't. And it only takes one safe person. It only takes one safe place. And if they can come and have that safe place, even for an hour a week or an hour a month, that safety can be just enough to give a breath of relief in the wounding that they live in. That doesn't mean that it's easy for us, because their defenses are up, their armor is up, they don't want to listen, they don't want to take their cues. They can take a long time to collect, or we might go through an hour and not be able to collect them. I had one person that I taught, it took me 5 months of seeing this child every other day to even be able to collect them. 8. So it is daunting. It is a big task. It's something that we can't take personally. I remember one boy, 4 years in, gang kid, one of the hardest kids that I worked with, one of the most defended, one of the most rude, one of the most challenging kids that I ever taught. And I remember one day the whole class walked out and he was at the end and he went to the door and he shut the door and came back in. And within 2 minutes, he said 3 sentences and laid down on the floor in a fetal position and wept. I had no idea it was coming. I would have never thought in a million years that I had any kind of connection with that kid from what was coming at me. So we just don't know. And so I think it's really important to just remember that, as Leah says, God's love in action is never wrong.
I've thought about that.
Yeah.
How many times this week?
Yeah, without sounding trying, the power of God, by God, and all of these things. But I want to say that what you said when our sister here said put wheels on my car, all that you've taught in these last 3 Thursdays, I wish there was going to be a 4th and a 5th.
Wouldn't that be fun? We could do so much.
You come here, I'll join you. I'll be here. How important it is, like I was thinking about Jesus in this, and thinking he lived for 3 years. He collected his disciples for 3 years. Connected and collected with them, because we don't just grab this stuff in a second. And how important it is for the Word of God to be, like when you said this is a lot of work, thank you. I guess I have to be on the microphone, but okay. All that to say that, you know, I'm thinking, okay, Lord, I want to apply prayer and faith. Our faith is certainly a huge part of this. Jesus is the healer. He's the one who will heal them. But how important it is for us to understand the workings of humanity so that the power of God can work. And I'm starting to think, oh man, like that's where some of the disconnect has been in my life, and maybe even in my spiritual journey. Well, not maybe, for sure, in that there hasn't been an allowance for the humanity, the human of me. And so the spirit of me is doing all this. I mean, but understanding and putting wheels on my car is I'm just getting like a download of spiritual revelation about why prayer works then. When you're collecting and connecting with kids, when you're the hinge, even in your own life, when people are that hinge for you, how now the power of God, the word of God can be transformative. And even when you talked about giving something to somebody that may all they have to hold on to. How much we have, I was reminded of Brianna and one of the messages she gave, and she had a card of who we are in God, who you are in Christ, who he says you are, and how powerful that is when you're understood and loved in the humanity. Then those things become life and anchors. So I'm sorry, bear with me, but it's like I'm just getting this download going, oh, I understand now why the two have to walk together. So it's very good. Yeah. So thank you. So please come back next Thursday. I'll be here.
All right. Well, it has been a real treat to sit in relationship with all of you and to sit in the heart of God, and that the relationship becomes the bottom line. It is the way through. It's what he modeled for us. It's who he is. He is love. He is the relationship. He is the one who did it fully, maturely. And so as he's done it, we can look to him for how to do this. He can be the safe space for us to do this, and we can find that safe space in him. And as we find it within ourselves, we then naturally and freely outflow that to others. So we love the Lord our God with all of our heart, with all of our mind, and with all of our being. And then we love our neighbor as ourself. So I have a few resources at the back table. I just am quickly going to mention this because a lot of the heart of, intuitively I walked this for 20 years. It was God's journey with me. And then I met, actually God found me in it, in the Neufeld Institute with Dr. Gordon Neufeld. And I've spent countless hours and many years walking with the Neufeld Institute. And this material is predominantly the science of this comes from Dr. Gordon Neufeld. I spend a lot of time in mentorship with his daughter, Tamara Stryjak, and her anxiety material is really shaped in a lot of this. And so I just have to give my gratitude, and I'm so thankful to the work that they have done to bring language to what relationship really is and what love really looks like. I've got a book of Gordon Neufeld's on the back, Dr. Gordon Neufeld, Hold On to Your Kids. It's in regards to peer orientation. If there's resources that you're looking for to go further, there's also the website of the Neufeld Institute. You can go on there. It's the neufeldinstitute.org. I've got a list in your notes, a list of resources. The neufeldinstitute.org. There's tons of articles, tons of editorials. There's classes, self-paced courses you can sign up to take. Deborah McNamara is also an author. She has a phenomenal book called Rest, Play, Grow, Understanding, Making Sense of Preschoolers or Anyone Who Acts Like One. And it's all about the connection and the attachment and what that looks like. And so she also has a website that is full of blogging, phenomenal blogging she has. Tamara Stryjak has a book out called Reclaiming Our Students. It's walking alongside educators and how to walk alongside the aggression and the anxiety Why are they so full of aggression and anxiety, and how do we help? And so she has a great book out, and all of it comes back around all of this material. So those are some resources for you. One more resource that you can take a look at on the way back is I love children's books. The One Step Removed, I often read them to adults. I have a few that are my favorite that are all about connection, collecting, bridging. There's one called Invisible String that's all about bridging when apart, how to hold on when apart. So you can take a look at a few of those things, and that will give you a little bit to touch on. And yeah, if I ever do get the invitation to come back, I would gladly continue on. So bless all of you, and thank you. Thank you for the joy being together.
Thank you so much, Tracy. I mean, you can really tell from the energy in the room that people are with you, and that was really meaningful and powerful for a lot of people. So we are super excited to be able to put this into practice, I think, right, guys? And so, yeah, like looking to put this into our relationships and our connections, whether it's with actual kids or people who act like them. So, and that can be me too, and I'm sure people can relate to that. So let's pray together. And then, Lord, we're so grateful that you brought us here together, even though we may be online or in person. I just ask that you would take this knowledge and put it from our head to our heart so that we can apply it, so that we can act in love, and we can act with caring, and we can act with all these things, God. And we just ask that you would put the blood of Jesus over Tracy, that you would seal everything that she's taught, that you would protect her from anything that may want to come after she's shared her heart and her passion, God. And we just pray for the coming days and weeks that you would give us opportunities that are clear, that we can be like, we know how to do this. This seems so similar to what we just talked about, and just help us to act that out. In your name I pray, amen. Thank you, everybody.